He once anxiously opened an April letter from a fancy school he couldn't afford. What was the letter you opened from some school? You were like,
Well, I was really fortunate. I had scholarships throughout college. And you mentioned a really important point. Education is the great transformer. Education completely transformed my life, completely transformed my parents' lives. And that's why everyone wants to go to college, not surprisingly.
They want to go to college, but when you and I went, it was a little bit cheaper. It's outrageous now. Everybody knows the basic themes of the story. I want to know the to-do list for the fancy 250 schools like NYU. What is the action plan for the kids entering the last week of August?
Well, the number one long-term thing we have to do is we have to continue to educate our population, in particular alums and people who believe in higher education, on the importance of making an investment in higher education so that we can defray the cost that the students have to pay to go to school. And that's the one thing that keeps all of us up at night at NYU and all of these elite institutions. We absolutely have to find a way to educate the American and broader population about the need to invest in higher education. Because there are underlying cost structures that are being driven, frankly, by technology, by the great demand to come to U.S. universities that are driving up the cost for very fundamental reasons.
Scarlet, this is a key issue. Is what's really driving this on a price theory basis is the demand to go to NYU,
Absolutely.
The demand to go to Cornell, Cornell.
From the rising emerging middle class in all those other countries. And that's the thing, admitting foreign students who can pay the full ride, the Chinese students, the Brazilian students, the Russian students, who can pay the full tuition, the whole kit and caboodle every year. That's been university stopgap measure as a way to make sure that they can keep getting the revenue without necessarily admitting students who need financial aid.
Well, I think the key thing to remember is the mission of our university, at NYU, and for all schools of higher education, is that you want to admit the best students irrespective of financial need. And in order to do that, we really have to continue to make this big push to invest in higher education.
What Scarlet mentions, John Silber at Boston University, I would suggest, invented this idea. You bring in full boat foreigners to support the programs you're talking about. Are your schools too expensive now? Is the real issue here that the schools have gotten so fancy or so many derivative things that they're doing that $45,000 tuition should stay there for 5 years?
No, as you said earlier, the fundamental issue which is driving up the cost of higher education is supply and demand. And so the key issue is how do we deliver maximum value for that underlying cost. For instance, if you look at the U.S. unemployment rate, 3.9% amongst college graduates. So universities are delivering value, but the key question is how do you make it more affordable, and how do you again convince our investors, so to speak, the public, that they need to invest in higher education.
Well, on that question, and back to the debate of the moment in Washington right now, what should they do with those Stafford loans? Should they let them be cut in half? Should they tie them to the 10-year Treasury yield?
Well, it's complicated. If you think about tying Stafford loans to the 10-year Treasury yield, the thing you worry about is tying students to floating rates. So I think we have to be very careful and be very thoughtful. I mean, obviously we want to have an answer for students when they come back in the fall, but we have to think very carefully about the long-term implications of our actions today.